All right, so that's the entire acronym for STEM. So I have to clear another few things before I head to the topic is, firstly, STEM education is offered in schools, all right, in some of the schools, not India. It's not very popular in India, but in European countries and in US, STEM education is offered in schools as a separate curriculum, all right. And I'll just show you how a STEM, um, a school offering STEM curriculum looks like, or a classroom which is, offering STEM education. It's essentially like this. So you can look at how the students are occupied, right? It's something that I'm sure none of us would have had in our education system, and we would only had like a book, paper, pen, and probably some fancy box. But you can look at the students, how they are interacting with each other in the first picture, and how a kid is working with, looks like a Lego set, but it's not really a Lego set. And and you can look at the final picture where they're working with robots, right? Also promoting robotics. So this is how a STEM classroom looks like, and students get to work, can get hands-on experience while they're simultaneously learning. All right, and one of the reasons as to why STEM education became popular is they noticed that students exposed to STEM education at an early age had better advantages once they entered universities. So that was the main reason STEM gained popularity. So that's a separate genre of STEM, and it's offered in schools. So you might be wondering, why are we looking at something that's offered in schools? Most of you all are university students and want to pursue higher studies, right? You might not be expecting to get inside schools. So I'm not sticking to school. So what we're going to look at is STEM disciplines. All right, so when I refer to STEM disciplines, what I'm referring to is, I'm referring to occupations that are required to be educated in streams like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we're going to focus on that. So that's going to be my entire topic when I'm referring to STEM education and the gap that can be bridged or not. So the points that I put on the presentation, I've already covered the second point, and I also covered the third point. So moving on to some of the misconceptions as to why STEM is, it's not something that we hear, right? We know about the ICSE, we know about the state, we know about the IGCSE, the IBDP programs, multiple programs. But however, we don't hear STEM education as such, or STEM disciplines. We don't really come about with this terminology. And one of the reasons for that is being that a common misconception that people have with regards to STEM education, and assuming that it's a study of stem cells. And that's why I brought up the first picture, and I had to remove that misconception. So, and or getting back to the history as to how STEM became or got the acronym STEM. Originally it was SMET, SMET, and which they wanted to change because it sounded like smut in occasions, and it didn't really sound very good, and they had to change it to STEM, and that's how STEM began. So now we're heading to the primary topic, and I'll be addressing the issues about the gap. And before heading on to addressing the issues related to STEM education and this gap, I need to clear a few things. And the most of the facts that I'll be providing and information that I'll be providing is based on studies. So I don't want you to be thinking that I'm just making things up. So, and also I request you all to have an open mind to accept certain psychological studies that's related to STEM, and why the gap is prevalent. All right. So the issues in STEM disciplines. So you can just look at the amount of studies. I mean, it's not a lot, but it is a decent amount of studies that I've displayed here. There's obviously more studies that the underrepresentation of women in the field of STEM is worldwide. All right, it's not just in particular locations. It's worldwide. And one issue that they've noticed was, most of the educators and psychologists that they've noticed is that women are well represented in social and life sciences field. In life sciences, I mean CBZ and botany and natural sciences basically. Um, you can notice that there's more amount of women, but at the same time, when you look at fields like technology, or be it like mechanical engineering or computer engineering or programming, or disciplines like that, you find less amount of women. All right, and in social sciences again, there's a good amount of women, and most of the times it's equal. But however, in STEM disciplines, it's always less. So some of the questions that I'll be addressing, one is to what extent, like I've already mentioned this before, to what extent the women are underrepresented in the STEM worldwide. And another Can some of you all approve? The people that are waiting in the lobby. And so the next research question is the gender gap. Is it observed in countries which are rated or higher on the equality scale? And another question that I'll be addressing is what are the possible reasons for this underrepresentation of women? All right. So I hope you're with me. So the first question has to look how are the women underrepresented worldwide. And this is a report that I've gotten from the UNESCO Women in Sciences 2019 report. It's relatively new. Um, so according to that report, it says that the representation of women researchers is less than 30%. So I think it's something that needs immediate attention because research is something that's dominating and it should have diverse genders, right? And even though women are seen, pursuing sciences, but when it comes to research and development, there's less than 30% worldwide. And this is just a map that shows or displays, the gender representation of women in research and development worldwide. And you can notice that how the color shading is. I mean, the lighter colors refers to lesser representations. Less than 30% refers to light. And I'm not sure if your screen is, if it's clear enough, but you can see that countries like India, it's almost like it's snow. But I mean, that again represents less amount of women representation. Over on to a clearer view that we get. It says that it's highlighted in bold. 29.3% is the statistics for women researchers worldwide on an average. So that's quite less. So how bad is this gender gap, or to what extent it's been affected? Some of the reasons, some of the other effects of this gender gap can be seen in terms of research leaders. Obviously, you have research leaders like your team leaders, like how you have in softwares. You also have research leaders, and there's less amount of research representatives worldwide. In terms of women, and also it's seen that even though women make tremendous progress in the fields of biomedical sciences and social sciences, there's about only 20% when it comes to in the field of engineering. All right, and that's something that I already mentioned. And one out of every 7 engineers are females. I mean, the ratio is 1:7. So I mean, that's again less. And another issue that's been noticed in the STEM fields is that even though women are seen pursuing engineering or be it technology or any of the STEM fields, even though they choose to pursue that particular career, they do not stay in that field for long, or they do not choose to work in that particular field. They just graduate but do not stay in that particular field, which is again known as the STEM pipeline problem, which I'm going to mention it further. Again, it's seen in even countries like US, right? US is something that all students want to go there, right? We all want to study and move to different places, and US is probably in the top of the list if you want to move abroad. But even like a developed country like US also witness this particular gender gap. When you look at the US workforce, 48% of it is comprising of women. I mean, that's pretty much equal, right? 48, that means only 2% extra is men. But in that 48%, when you look at STEM, the representation of women is only 24%, which is really low. And so I'm just highlighting this to let you all know that even in a developed country like US, we see less amount of female population in terms of enrolling in STEM and working in STEM. So I mean, you might be wondering what is the purpose of this? Especially some of the men out there might be thinking, I mean, what's the whole point of addressing this gender gap, or maybe not? But what is the importance of this particular topic? I mean, it's just more than me displaying some statistics. The issue goes beyond that. And I mean, let me just give you an example. So research and development is something that's in constant demand, right? It's something that we depend on. And when it comes to STEM fields, it's something that's contributing immensely towards the society. I mean, be it a car that's coming out, or be it medicines that's coming out, it's all out of research and development. I mean, even when you're designing a vehicle, it's always good to have both viewpoints from both the genders, from a male and a female. I mean, when you're designing a car, it's both genders that's gonna drive the car, right? And the morphologically and like also physically, we are all different. I mean, men tend to be more muscular at times, and they look for different things in a car, or be it medicines also. They work differently on a man and a woman. So it's always important to get different perspectives, and that's why this particular having a gender equal, um, gender diverse people in terms of working in STEM is really important. And apart from that, you also tend to get newer ideas, research question, or newer perspectives, right, from different genders. And also, you're also missing out on equally talented women in the workforce. So if majority of them pursues the STEM and choose to withdraw or switch careers, you're losing out on probably some of the well versed students in that particular crowd, and that eventually affects the quality that you're going to have in your particular company or in your particular workforce. So that's again really important that we need to look into. And it's also noticed that even though some women, most of the women out there choose to pursue STEM, less amount of uh, females tend to choose to pursue higher studies like PhDs. So that's again an issue that's really needs to be addressed. And again, stagnancy in terms of startups. We all know Elon Musk, we know Jeff Bezos, we know Bill Gates. Again, dominating, these men are at the epitome when it comes to STEM, right? And their contribution towards society, it's pretty immense. So again, when you're looking at such entrepreneurs in STEM, there's again a lag, and this lag in turn also reduces the country's economy. So if you're not having quality workforce or a diverse workforce, again you're losing out on your country's labor, right? So it's really good to have efficient workers around us and boost the country's economy. Also, it was noticed that whenever career choices are provided to both men and women, men are likely to stay in the particular STEM field compared to women, and they are much less likely to drop compared to women. So, we looked at all this important. We looked at what is STEM education. We looked at how it's offered in schools. We looked at how to the extent of how the gender gap is prevalent, and we also looked at why we need to address this particular gap. And I mentioned about how even when it comes to designing a vehicle, or be it designing a drug, or be it doing a research, it's always important to have different perspectives and also to boost a country's economy on the whole. So some of the reasons why this gap is prevalent, and this will again benefit the teachers, I mean, out there to look into these aspects. So the gender, when it comes to gender differences, it was observed that psychologists were studying this since ages, and it was observed that gender differences were more prominent during the middle school. And even it was noticed that in an adolescent age, the boys scored more compared to girls on investigative interests. So what is this investigative interest? Investigative interest is nothing but having that curiosity mindset, and also being more analytical, and more inclined towards mathematics, or some fields that require less interaction, or looking the world from a different angle. And person who prefers solitude, who likes to work on research, so that comes under investigative interest. So it was noticed that the boys scored more compared to girls, which is quite interesting. And when it comes to enterprising and artistic interest, the younger women scored more. And what do I mean when I refer enterprising or artistic interest? Is enterprising is nothing but working with people, persuading people, interacting with people, encouraging people, motivating people. So feels like that, enterprising. And when it comes to artistic interest, it refers to things that are related to art, like modeling, mm, or cake, decorating a cake, or designing clothes, or painting, or music, dance, all that. So it was seen that so it was observed that women, at a young age, had more of enterprising and artistic interest. And when they had this higher artistic and enterprising interest, they're more likely to deviate from STEM. So that's an interesting psychological study that was made. And also, this is again an interesting study that was noticed, and this again inclined or caused more of the deviation from the STEM. Women were more likely to have more better mathematical skills combined with verbal skills. So it was noticed that on an average, uh, the girls who had significant, like really good mathematical abilities, which is crucial for STEM. I think most of y'all will agree that mathematics is important for when you're entering any field in STEM, like engineering, mechanical, computer science, right? Mathematics plays a huge role. So like women who had good mathematical abilities were also seen having good verbal skills. And this combination often resulted in deviation because women chose to pursue a field that, helped or that worked with their verbal skills. All right. So women often chose careers that supported their verbal skills. And there was again a deviation. So another study that was predominantly is very popular among psychologists and is something that really caught my attention after looking at the study to work on this particular topic was that it was seen that the primary cause for this deviation in STEM is because women prefer to, on an average, this does not apply to all. So I hope you get that in the picture. So it was seen that women like to work with people, whereas, men on an average like to work with things. Things meaning, objects like, for example, a computer or be it like a car or, things that are more mechanical. Whereas women love to work with people on an average, again, does not apply to all. Obviously, there are exceptions, but this was seen to be constant. And this particular interest oriented, women to work more or deviate more from the STEM or work with careers that dealt with working with people. All right. So I hope you got that. So, and again, it's very natural for an individual to perform in an environment that works, that suits their liking. So women went with careers that dealt with working with people and, serving the people, and dealt with social interest, subjective task value, and communal goals. Communal goals here refers to, working for a particular welfare of a particular person and encouraging a particular person. So this is one of the primary reasons to see this deviation. And again, this was witnessed, this was done in around 70 countries, not 70. This covered, diverse countries, and the study was quite huge. And I'll just show you the study. Wait. This study was conducted, the study was conducted using around 5 lakh people as participants, observing the males and the women together. And it was always noticed that the males scored more on things that were related to gadgets, whereas female on the contrary scored more on things that measured with helping people. So this is again measuring the interest. So again, other reasons related to this deviation from STEM, this is the obvious reasons that we all know. There's less awareness. The women are most likely to get less awareness in terms of STEM and less study opportunities because that discrimination again works into the picture, and less female mentors for them to look up to, and duration to become an expert in STEM. Again, STEM takes a lot of time, and lesser encouragement from the opposite sex. This is something that you witness in the workplace, right? The gender male dominant workplace. And so we've looked at a lot of aspects, right? From, the interests and how the investigative interests affected and the enterprising and artistic interests affected. And then working with people and working with things also had an effect on this deviation. So apart from that, another reason, now we're coming to the biological aspects. So it was noticed that on an early childhood, during early childhood, the spatial ability also contributes to the emergence of gender differences in mathematics and sciences. So the sex hormones that released increases the spatial ability difference, and it was seen that the men are most likely to get more spatial ability compared to the women. And again, this is related to the evolutionary trait where the men were earlier hunter gatherers and they had to have good sense of direction. So here the spatial ability here refers to basically having a sense of your surroundings, right? That's what I'm referring to. And this again contributes to the deviation in STEM. Having higher spatial ability, again, more likely you're more likely to be in the STEM fields. So that's what I'm implying. So this was noticed that during an early pubescent stage, when the sex hormones are released, the spatial ability difference causes men to have more increased spatial ability, whereas the women to have less spatial ability, again contributing to the gender gap. So this is one of my favorite topics again, and I hope you haven't dozed off yet. Um, so this is something that we all might be wondering. So what about the gender countries which are gender equal, right? The Scandinavian countries. What about them? Countries which are rated the highest in terms of gender equality. So this is again an interesting study that was conducted, and it was noticed that, I mean, so far, what do you expect in a gender equal society? Not to have, large gender gaps, right, in terms of STEM or beat any fields for that matter. But quite the contrary happened. So in countries like the Scandinavian countries where there's more amount of gender equality, what was noticed is that, I mean, even though the girls scored higher in mathematics and sciences, when it came to college degrees, there was a large gender gap in terms of in the STEM disciplines. So there were more number of men choosing to opt, STEM fields compared to the women. And this is really interesting because we all strive to be an equal society, but when you're in an equal society, the gender gap is larger. So known as gender equality paradox, and that's what I mentioned in the title. So a famous example that I'm going to take here is Finland. I'm pretty sure most of you all know what Finland is famous for, their education system. You can look at the education system as one of the top education systems that we're looking at. However, when you look at Finland's higher education, the university, Finland has one of the largest gaps in STEM. That's quite contrary, right? Like you can look at Finland currently in the year 2020, last year, it was rated third in the global gender gap index. But however, when you're looking at the someone's there. However, when you look at the gender gap in terms of their STEM disciplines in the universities, Finland has one of the largest gaps. And again, this applies to countries like Norway and Sweden, which is again ranked second and fourth in global gender gap index. But again, there's a prevalent gender gap. And this was noticed when they conducted a PISA test, which is conducted worldwide to assess the students from different countries. And this is how the education system is measured and how we get to know that Finland is in the top. So it was observed that boys scored more in mathematics compared to reading, and this is the reason why the gender gap is prevalent, and I'm going to explain why this particular aspect is happening. Is because the girls scored more in mathematics and sciences, like I mentioned, but they scored even better in terms of reading, and their linguistic skills were higher compared to the boys. And eventually when you're choosing your career, you're likely to choose careers that are more suited to your strengths, right? You're not going to choose in subject that you fail. For example, if I failed in mathematics, I'm not going to pursue engineering and try to be Elon Musk or Albert Einstein, right? Because my marks is 0. So that's what I'm implying here. And this is a common psychological trait that students have. So the girls in Finland scored really good in terms of mathematics and sciences, and some of them even scoring better than the boys. But their real strength was in linguistics and reading and articulating. So they ended up choosing careers that are most suited to their strengths. And you might be wondering, why is this happening? Why is this deviation? Why the girls are choosing, how come their reading capabilities are higher compared to the boys, and why the boys' reading capability is lesser? It's because, when you're looking at their lifestyle itself, boys are more likely to be working with gadgets at an early age as an adolescent, more, addicted to their phones. Whereas, women choose to, the girls in Finland are more inclined to reading, and, that's how their skill improves on a long run, and they end up, deviating from STEM. So this, I'm not mentioning the PPT, but this is the actual reason. So this again, covers whatever we've looked at so far. So some of the solutions for this entire gender gap, right? So I've just mentioned a few solutions that I could, think of. And so again, the solutions are linked to what the issues itself. The issues in itself are some of the solutions that we can look to neutralize this gender gap. And one is to make the STEM fields more attractive for the fallout gender. So how could we make it more attractive for the women or for the fallout gender? This can be applied in terms of in other fields also, where there's more number of women but less number of men. Like for example, nursing or teaching also, for that matter. Sometimes there's less amount of less amount of men. So this is something that could be applied in both the angles. So as to make it attractive for the fallout gender, and how you do it in STEM is that encourage the girls to also operate gadgets and technology at an early age to improve their, and also activities to improve their spatial memory, and to also to eliminate all sorts of gender stereotypes. So, and also give them equal opportunity to exercise both investigative and their critical thinking skills, which again promotes our entry into STEM, which we already I described. And also workplace could be made more people oriented. So one of the major drawbacks of STEM and women not preferring it is obviously they like to work with people, and this is more inclined to working with things. Make it little people oriented. Offer, make the workplace more interactive at times, not always, not gossip stories when you're working in places like, when you're working under, a software company. But I'm saying make it more interactive. Offer, like some amount of break where they get to interact with people, so that there's more. It makes it more attractive for the fallout gender. So some of the solutions that could be applied, and this has to be applied at an early age itself from the childhood. When you're customizing the education curriculum for the particular child. But also, like I mentioned, the other places like in the workplace could be applied to, in higher institutions as well as, your companies. So with that, I end my topic. So thank you everyone for listening. I hope you were.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. The presentation was really systematic and logical. Really appreciated, Kenneth. If anyone has questions, they can ask both the speakers at once. Our next speaker for today's session is Soumya Rachel, and she's going to speak about knowing women in the field of science. Soumya is currently pursuing her master's in zoology at Madras Christian College, Tambaram. She has also participated in a lot of extracurricular activities, which also included being part of an NSA, a Natural Science Association, and also the secretary in the past years. I hope her presentation will be quite interesting and informative. All the best, Soumya. Over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Today, I will be trying to talk about the gender disparity that is prevalent in the scientific community, and also shed light on some of the women who have succeeded in the field of science and the obstacles that they have had to face. So, why are there fewer women in science? Now, this may be due to many reasons, but one possible reason, and mostly the most common reason, is because of people's mindset. So, only 15% of the Indian research and development workforce are women, while the global average is 30%. This is way lower than what it has to be. And this is not even taking into consideration the women who come from the scientific and teaching background, which is actually way lower than the global perspective. And many reasons may influence this, maybe gender bias or people's perceptions. And girls' achievements and interest in math and science are shaped by the environment around them. Hello? Yeah, and shaped by the environment are shaped by the environment around them, and this has largely to do with the lack of infrastructure in the India high schools. Then the problem comes even from the female community, because there are not many women who pursue their careers in STEM, and they drop out at an earlier stage, including PhD holders, master holders, and even women engineers. And this leads to one of the most important aspects that even Anthony spoke about, and that is of the leaky pipeline. And academia systematically pushes women out and fails to provide institutional and individual support. If women who happen to be childbearing and tend to be dropped out of the of scientific research because they are seen as a liability, and research funding is not given to them. So what happens is that when there is this leaky pipeline that exists, there is a there is a loss not only to the institute in terms of loss in terms of uh, lo- loss in terms of lack of diversity of thought and research, but also on the female side where she loses her job. And there are many factors. One is that there are no women role models, and women role models who tend to occupy spaces and positions of high authority generally do not groom younger female scientists, and this is one problem that needs to be addressed. Now, peer pride in science, and estimates suggest that LGBTQ people are 17 to 21% less represented in STEM fields than expected. Now, this statistic is only taking into consideration the global aspect. If one was supposed to look into India and the representation of the LGBTQ community in India, there is no such statistic that is available to talk about their representation. This is highly to do with the whole social construct of the Indian community. Trans people tend to face more problems as compared to women, and this is may be due to the segregation that is prevalent in the Indian campuses. Many individuals from the LGBTQ community who tend to pursue a scientific path, a scientific career, uh, tend to take a back seat in a way that they feel that their personal identities are not as important as their objective of scientific truth. This is largely to do with the lack of role models and lack of support and mentors that they have. Now, there are not many prominent transgender scientists that we know of from the Indian community. However, A. Money is a researcher and does research in rough sect. She is a leading researcher and occupies a position in the Indian Rough Set Society. International Rough Set Society. She faced difficulties in judgment both during her transition as well as post-transition period. It is important to note that she has transitioned not because of the social construct that she is in, but because of how her being closeted affected her research. She believes that after transition, she is able to be more open and talk about how her research affects people, and realize that hierarchies are not well suited for her. Today, she has co-edited and authored nearly half research volume titled Algebraic Methods and in General Rough Sets. The we need to think about now that we need to think about the position of women today, but few years ago, in fact many decades ago, it was not the same as it is today. For example, Maria Mitchell is the first and American, and the only first American to have discovered the comet, which was named as the Miss Mitchell's comet, as well as she is the first person to get a professional job as an astronomer. She played an important role in including women in sciences, and set up a association known as the American Association for Advancement of Women. She was the first woman to join the Academy of Arts and Sciences and served as a role model to her successors. Now, Esther Lederberg. Esther Lederberg is known because of her studies in isolating the bacterial virus Lambda phage. She also developed the method of replica plating, the method where one can reproduce bacterial colonies, and also for the discovery of the bacterial fertility factor, that is the F factor, that plays an important role in DNA replication. Now, many of us may know of the things that she achieved in life, but however, no one knows about the shortcomings that she had to experience. She received her master's degree in genetics from the Stanford University and served as a research assistant in Carnegie Institute. But this path of hers was not one without shortcomings. She applied for a position of professorship in the Department of Genetics, but did not receive it because of being female. Now she realized that her gender would means that she would have to work twice as hard to achieve those things that were readily available to men. She married Joshua Lederberg, who sadly received recognition for all the work that they both did together. The papers that she co-edited, she did not receive credit for. The papers that she did receive credit for, she was only named as the second author. And the worst part is that her husband received the Nobel Prize for the studies that she did and that resulted in discovering the fertility factor and the replicum plating that is widely used and is highly efficient in reproducing bacterial colonies in microbiology. Rosalind Franklin. Now, all of us know about the molecular structure of DNA. She is well known for the picture that is photo 51 that is seen on the slide here. Photo 51 seen on the slide here, and she as well as Maurice Wilkins were working in King's College London so as to determine different properties of DNA. The sad part is that Maurice Wilkins never took her to be his equal and always considered her to be a research assistant. Due to certain misunderstandings between the two of them, what he did was he took this picture 51 and showed it to Watson and Crick, who were working in Cambridge University to determine the DNA structure. Because of this, Maurice, Watson, and Crick were able to publish their findings, and later on did Rosalind Franklin publish her findings. Nobel Prize was awarded to Watson, Crick, and Wilkins for discovering the molecular structure. But the sad part is the Rosalind Franklin had passed away by the time they received their Nobel Prize, and because of which she was not awarded and is not recognized for her work. Now, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, she in her undergraduate studies, studied something known as pulsars, where it talks about the stars who are in supernova, and after they blast they become tiny incredibly small stars, and their rotation produces signals. She recorded these signals and translated them with the use of the telescope that she assembled. Her studies were of great importance, but the sad part is that she did not receive recognition. Her advisor and Martin Ryle received the recognition where she was left off. As compared to Rosalind Franklin and the other women that I had spoken about before, because she was not recognized, there was a wave of sympathy that was created, and because of which she received more recognition than them later on. She says that even though her work did not receive recognition at that time, she serves to be an inspiration to the younger generation, and talks about the need of inclusivity, including women in this, and need for increasing women representation in the scientific community. Now, Kamala Suhuni, she is a great inspiration to all women. After her after graduating from her bachelor's degree, applied for a research assistant post in the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. At that time, Nobel laureate Dr. C.V. Raman rejected her application on because she was female. This did not deter her. She started something known like a Gandhian Dharna, and so as to ask him why she was not included, even though she was made a merit list. Because of her perseverance, she was given something of a probation of 1 year and would be recognized only if she would meet the demands that Dr. C.V. Raman would set forth. One of which was that she would have to work late during the night hours, um, so that this would not serve as discrimination to her male counterparts. Her efforts were fruitful as she was able to get a guide under a guide who was Dr. Srinivasaya, who studied about protein structures present in legumes, milk, etc., and because of which she received her master's degree. After she received her master's degree, she received a scholarship from Cambridge University. Because of this recognition that she received from the scientific community, Dr. C.V. Raman opened the gates of the Indian Institute of Science to women from the year 1937. It is because of women like her that today women like Dr. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw and other such women are able to occupy positions in scientific communities. Well, we all know about Jennifer and Emmanuel, who received the Nobel Prize in 2012 for CRISPR. And this recognition serves as a great leap for the scientific community because acknowledging and recognition plays an important role and boosts the morale of other women who are trying to pursue a STEM career. Marie Curie serves as like a basis. She serves as an inspiration to many of the women today. She was the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize. Although when she received her Nobel Prize, it was only because the effort and the push that the Pierre Curie, her husband. He said that it was not right that only he should receive the Nobel Prize because it was both her and his work that led to their discoveries in radioactivity. As a result, half of the Nobel Prize was shared between him and her, and the other half was received by Henry Becquerel. She is also the first woman to claim the Nobel honors twice. The first time was in physics with her husband, and the second time was in chemistry for the discovery of polonium and radium. We need to understand that diversity is the critical to excellence, and as a scientific community that both being open-minded and needs to accept and open to change, we need to accept all communities, all gender identities. Acknowledgement needs to be given to everyone, irrespective of how great their success is. Individual efforts and contributions, irrespective of gender, race, etc., needs to be recognized. And possible solutions are to policy making that would increase research funding for women, especially those women who face bias because of childbearing and other such reasons. And I would like to end by saying that there is a great scope for development and inclusivity in including women in the scientific community. And it is important that we not only include women, but start becoming more open towards including the LGBTQ community, as many of them face um, insecurities in coming out to their peers because they may face a judgment, and this judgment leads to mental illness and all other such things which can be avoided if we just be more open and welcoming. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Soumya. That was really inspiring and insightful. Hope everyone found it interesting. Upcoming, we have the question and answer sessions, and it'll be handled by Chandana. Um, Once again, I'm really heartfully thankful to both the speakers for making this session a success. Over to you, Chandana.
Now we begin the Q&A session. Participants with doubts can unmute their mics and ask the questions to both of our speakers, or the questions can also be typed on the chat box.
ये ऑलमोस्ट 5 kg मतलब है कि
Participants can ask their questions. Also, remember the feedback forms are posted in the chat box. You can fill in. Certificates will reach to the registered participants. If there aren't direct questions, will wait for the participants to ask. But both Anthony and Soumya can shed more light on any topic or any concept that you left not attended to, or you missed presenting. You could add on to your presentation now. We'll wait for the participants also, give them some more time to come up with some questions. Okay. Either of you, any one of you. Am I audible? Soumya, Anthony are here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay. So that is one thing, if you can add on to anything further. The other thing, when this webinar notice was posted in different platforms, in different circles and groups, the question came is, this is archaic. We are still stuck with men and women kind of debate. In many places, the women are already outshining. So are we still holding to that logic? Is that okay? Was one kind of question that popped up. Would you like to comment on this, both of you?
So can I answer that question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So that's actually a really good question that you asked. Are the women outshining? Is this still prevalent in this current scenario? That's what you're implying, no, sir? The
They are,
gap?
yes, exactly.
Sir, it is prevalent, sir. So what exactly happens is that women are present, and you might have noticed even this. I mean, I need not tell you, you're the professor. You might have noticed a lot of women dominating in, the natural sciences. But what the issue is that when it comes to higher education, for example, PhD that matter, and when it comes to even research publications, when you look at the publications, there's less publications in, when it comes to women in the fields of STEM. So that's one of the issues. So it is very much prevalent. And moving on to, another thing that you asked me to address in case I missed out anything is an Indian scenario. So I just mentioned worldwide. And interestingly, even in an Indian scenario, what you look at is the same thing happens again. Like even though women are seen pursuing, there's less amount of publications when you look at, Scopus or Web of Sciences. There's less contributions in terms of what women are offering in sciences. So that's something we need to look into. And this is totally different when it comes to social sciences again. And I mean, like you mentioned, again addressing the first question, like is it still dominant? Is it still prevalent? In terms of medical sciences, interestingly, our statistics, I don't know if this most of you all know this, there's more amount of women enrolling for medicine. So the ratio is quite the opposite when it comes to medicine, and there's less amount of men in enrolling for MBBS. So that's something we also need to look into. And when it comes to engineering, it's again there's more amount of men dominating. So in India, it's more amount of women in the field medical sciences. So we need to look at that also if we are providing a balance. So like you mentioned, sir, it is prevalent, but in India, there's more amount of women in medical sciences. So I think I've answered your question, and I've also given an Indian perspective.
Soumya, would you also like to add on?
Well, so I think he covered almost everything, but it it all depends on, well, it all comes at the end, it comes down to the person's interest. And now we have to start building that person's interest from grassroots levels. We just can't take it to like someone who wants to pursue science, they pursue science from 11th or 12th. If one has to inculcate that interest, it's going to have to start from lower classes. And that's why how Anthony said STEM education starts playing an important role. And integration of STEM in lower classes may slowly tend to bridge that gap, but there is for sure there's a misrepresentation, more people, more women in but in certain fields and more men in the other fields. But it all comes down to the exposure that that person has. And it education and the education construct plays an important role in that at that time.
Okay. What is making this topic even more interesting is the physiological parameter that Anthony roped in. They're talking about the hormone, the physiology. So it is a very sensitive topic. But again, to be open-minded in discussion, are there occupation, are there job wherein you have some sort of this is men, this is women kind of thing that Anthony was mentioning about the medical field being more represented by women. At least if we talk about one category of the nurses, at least with the demand for Indian nurses is, through the media reports, that is more because of their good attendance, good commitment. So are we linking, Anthony, the physiology parameter that you said, will that has to be accepted as natural, or is that bias?
Um, so, bro, can you? So when you mention
Uh,
physiology, you're referring
Dr.
to.
Paul wants to tell anything? We are not,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I just wanted to add that, as Anthony said, that the enrollment for women in MBBS is more than men. But again, when it comes to higher education in medical sciences, the women after MBBS, the men would be more for the MD or MS courses or further courses. And finally, the doctors practicing and in the field doctors, there would be more male doctors dominating. So again, the higher education thing comes here. Whether you the natural sciences or medical sciences, there are women to begin with. There are more women, but as you move on to the higher levels like PhD or MD, MS, due to family, like getting married, childbearing, all these like biological things would come, social things would come, and then men would move ahead in all the fields, mostly. And yeah, nurses, as you said, is right. Usually, we think women, they are more compassionate, or more, yeah, compassionate. So these are fields where they would do better than men, usually.
Even probably the primary education, it's
Yes,
women preferred.
teaching.
Yeah.
Teaching is something where, yeah. Both your talks were really nice, Soumya and Anthony. Another thing that I would like you all to read about is there is a book called Leelavati's Daughter. It's published by the Indian Academy of Sciences. So it's a compilation of all women, Indian women, uh, who had made a name for themselves in the field of science and technology, who are still working. Some of them have retired. So it's a good compilation. So you all can go back, men or women, girls and boys, all of you can get your hands on that book, Leelavati's Daughter. When you read about their stories, you will get inspired. What were their background? Some of them had supportive parents and supportive husbands. Some of them did not have supportive family, but still how they navigated the entire thing, you will get to know about their stories.
Thanks, Dr. Putul. As you said, I've copied the link and pasted in chat. That takes to the Indian Academy of Sciences website. That's
Okay. Yeah. That book is out of stock or in Amazon. I got hold of that book in that our resonance conference. The
Yes.
Indian Academy had put on these books, so I purchased that book immediately. I was looking for that book.
Yeah, I was about to tell. They
Yeah,
also gave some. They gave some complimentary copies. I believe we have to check that.
but I purchased it.
Okay. 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 Now there's a question in the chat box. I don't know if it is partly already to be answered. This is 20 CBZ 66. What about the pilots in plane? Why women are not being permitted to have this position? Any commentary by the speakers? I think in some places it's happening, even including the uh,
Sir,
armed forces. Yeah, tell.
I think
And
you have to be more clear. Where is it not happening? You have to be clear on that. So, I mean, I
CBZ
think they're pretty much
66. Would you like to add on? Yeah.
fly the planes. So, I don't know where you're referring to.
Exactly. 20 CBZ 66. Would you like to turn your mic on and ask, or would you like to continue to type? Some more clarification, if you can. We have time. The scheduled time is still 8:15. We did take off a bit late, considering some technical glitches. The student webinar series, fourth now in line, is all by alumni or present students or studying in St. Joseph's. An opportunity for them to speak on their passion, their interest, their project, or whatever they have published. So this is the student webinar series, and the purpose of having it hosted by the National Science Association, Department of Zoology. Okay, I'm just giving more time. Hope there are more participants who can throw light. You can contribute also your ideas and views about the topic. The National Science Day is around, so we thought this is an apt thing to put as a webinar topic. Okay, any add-ons from the speakers? We'll welcome. If not, another 2-3 minutes, we'll wind up. Okay, CBZ 66 has come back. What he meant is, I mean, why women are not having this position more. Yeah, there are some avenues where there is limited entry for women. So why is this? Like being pilots or being in the armed forces, which is now we are encouraging and it's happening. So there are some avenues where there is limited entry, limited access, limited opportunities. Is that a bias, or we haven't reached that level of admitting women? The speakers, if you want to share your views. Or anybody, any participant can also contribute. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that now, even in science, today we have come to the position that we are in after so many years. But pilots and army, it was highly a male dominated profession all these years. And for women to start, for more women to start coming out and starting to apply into these fields is going to take some time, and does bias does play a role in this. But the fact that there are more people, like, slowly but we surely reach there. No matter what, everyone's going to reach a level of representation, and it's going to take some fight on everyone's part to reach that position. So yeah, that's why there are few women. Few over these years there were only men. Now that there is acceptance, women will slowly start increasing in all these fields.
Good. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, and I know I don't see anything in the chat.
Can I just answer?
Yeah. Please,
Oh,
Anthony.
I mean, if I'm supposed to be frank, it's a good question, and based on the current literature studies that we have, um, just being frank, one of the possible reasons could be like how I mentioned is that again the interest plays a role. This could play a role, at least to some extent. Like you mentioned, if you're for example piloting a plane, what is the amount of interaction that you're going to have? It's going to be very least, right? So again, when you look at the studies that are pointed out, women are more inclined to working with people and having some social interactions compared to working with things. I mean, if you're piloting a plane, you're more likely to be interested in planes, right? That comes under things again. So I mean, I think interest also plays a role here. I mean, there are exceptions. Women have piloted. We've had like great pilots. We still do have some amazing pilots in our country, but I think the less amount again plays into some amount of interest, and that's why you again see a lot of air hostesses, right? In the planes, that's large in number because it deals with social interactions. So I think that could be, if you're looking for an answer that's dealt with the current literature studies, I think that would be your answer from me. So I hope that clears your question.
Yeah, that's an add-on. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, both of you. You shed light into different avenues. Yes, with time, things are changing. The proportion of discrimination that we talk, or any kind of other negative issues, they tend to exist, but as a sign, positive sign, there are changes happening. We see that also uh, as a good or a positive turn. Okay, that's it for the Q&A. I'll hand over to Chandana again. Yeah.
So, on behalf of our college, Natural Science Association, and Department of Zoology, I thank everyone for making this webinar a successful one. Special thanks to our speakers, Anthony, Kenneth, and Soumya Rachel, who gave a wonderful overview of their topics. I also thank our coordinator, Dr. M. Jaishankar, for organizing this webinar. Thanks to all the participants and my dear lecturers for active participation and support. Thank you all. So the feedback form will be sent to you on through mail. So please fill it up.
Yeah. Or else, Chandana, what is put on the chat box is the feedback.
So
Link.
that is for the attendance, sir.
Attendance,
so we have a separate feedback.
Okay, based on the attendance, we will send to only those people who fill the attendance, the feedback form. And once they fill the feedback form, automatically certificate reaches them, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you all the NSA volunteers. We are back into action for the next 2 months. We will keep ourselves occupied and connect to the society and students, create as usual more and more webinars and activities that NSA intends to. Thank you all. Thanks all the participants and teachers from different colleges. And special thanks to both the speakers, Anthony and Soumya. One lovely thing about all our students, alumni and present, is that their acceptance to our request, that they're ready to come, share their views and present. And that's a good spirit. Thank you, both of you. Thank you all. We end up this session webinar for now. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you, sir.